Defenses can also be divided into two other broad categories, complete and partial defenses. A complete defense, sometimes also called a perfect defense, is a defense that will result in an acquittal if the defendant is successful. So if the defendant shows that he or she acted in self-defense, for instance, then they will be found not guilty. A partial or incomplete or imperfect defense is one that does not result in an acquittal, a not guilty verdict, but may reduce the defendant's responsibility down from a higher crime to a lower one. So for instance, when we cover murder in another chapter, we'll discuss murder, of course, but we'll also discuss other homicides such as manslaughter. Manslaughter is a lower form of homicide. We'll see that what would otherwise be murder can be reduced down to manslaughter if we show that the person was acting in the heat of passion. So for instance, if a spouse came home and found their spouse in bed with somebody else and became so angry and so distraught that they killed their spouse and the spouse's lover, that certainly wouldn't be excusable. We wouldn't have a complete defense to say this person should be allowed to walk free, but we might recognize a partial defense of heat of passion, which would suggest that normally this defendant wouldn't have been a murderer, but because of the intense emotional disturbance of seeing their spouse in bed with somebody else, they killed. And so we're not going to justify that killing, we're not going to let them walk free, but we may reduce their criminal responsibility from murder to manslaughter, which still carries a heavy penalty with it, but nonetheless less than they would have received as a sentence for murder. As we have heard countless times on TV shows and movies and who knows where else, ignorance of the law is not a defense. And that's pretty much true in the law. The fact that you didn't know the law, but could have known it if you had looked for it. So we're not talking about a situation where there was no law in the books, but you just didn't bother to look that law up and you said, well, I didn't even know that was against the law. That's not a defense. Neither is mistake of the law. So if you thought that the law allowed you to do something when it didn't, that is not considered to be a valid defense. You could have taken the time, you could have hired an attorney if necessary, you could have found out what the law was. So as long as the law is clearly enough to be understood, clearly written enough to be understood, then you can't claim ignorance or mistake. However, mistake of fact can be a defense. So this isn't being mistaken about the statute or the existence of a law. This is being mistaken about some material fact. So my example that I give you here in this PowerPoint is someone picks up an item that they believe is theirs and they walk off with it. We're not going to charge them with theft if we truly believe that they thought it was theirs, but it turned out to be someone else's. So if you are sitting in the classroom and you pick up a backpack that you think is yours, it's the same brand, same color, etc., 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 and you walk off with it, and you really thought that it was yours, we're not going to likely be able to convict you of any kind of theft, because you're going to be able to come in and claim mistake of fact. You really thought it was yours, therefore you shouldn't be prosecuted. We could think of other situations where mistake of fact could occur too, and again with property, we could think that maybe someone had lost the item when in fact they hadn't, or maybe somebody put something out at the curb in front of their house and you thought it was just garbage and you picked it up when in fact they just set it there for the moment while they went inside to maybe eat lunch or eat dinner or whatever it might be. But if any reasonable person would have thought that it was also being thrown out as garbage, then it's unlikely that you're going to be charged with any kind of crime. So mistake of fact can actually be a defense. Mistake of law typically